Welcome, Dr. Tharoor, and thank you so much for joining us today. As we all know, Dr. Tharoor is a former Union Minister, a two-time Member of Parliament in the Lok Sabha from Kerala, and he's a supporter of Masuka. So thank you once again, Dr. Tharoor, for joining us.
Good to be with you, Tehseen.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me first ask you, the prevailing atmosphere in the country, where we have these repeated incidents of mob lynching, what are your thoughts about them?
Well, what can anyone's thoughts be but one of actual horror and shame? I mean, it's terrible these things are happening in our country. Human lives are being lost, and lost in the most appalling circumstances because a mob sort of combusts, as it were, in a way in which ultimately no one seems responsible, no one is actually able to look at the humanity of the person they're attacking. It just becomes a frenzy. And this kind of mob lynching, which has killed a lot of innocent people in our country, must be something that we want to see end in our land. And the only way it'll end is if people who have been doing it are not allowed to get away with it. I do want to stress that as an Indian, I'm ashamed when people say, oh, yours is a country where people are lynched in the name of the cow. I mean, it's a terrible thing to be able to have to acknowledge.
Absolutely, Doc. And therefore you joined us on the 19th of July, where we launched the draft law of Masuka. You've been a supporter of Masuka, you've been kind enough to advocate the law. So your thoughts on Masuka, and do you think a law like Masuka is needed today because there are lacunas in the current IPC and in the current law?
Yes, I mean, the obvious objection is there was already a law on the books against murder, so this is a form of murder, why do you need something else? But there's a particular pathology to mob violence, which I think requires specific action. And I think there's also the importance of being able to increase the level of punishment, to ensure that district magistrates and local police are held accountable, a number of provisions which don't exist in the routine, normal penal code. I will say though that the Manav Suraksha Kanoon is above all about protecting people. If through the passage of such a law, one can actually dissuade mob violence, that will be better than actually having to implement these punishments.
Absolutely, Doc. You also spoke about lynchings on the name of cow. But as we all know, lynching is not just happening on the name of cow, or it's not just communal. If we saw recently in Agra, a woman was lynched because she was accused of being a witch. So do you think Masuka tends to go in that direction and protect the vulnerable in society?
That's the idea. So the idea would be that no one should be subject to arbitrary violence by a bunch of people. They have safety in numbers, they think. So if there is more than a handful of people, I think the law specifically says anything more than three or more would be a mob. But in fact, when you see these mobs, people kind of gather, it becomes almost like a blood sport rather than actually a conscious act of murder. It becomes a collective rage against an innocent individual. And I think we do need to ensure that this has to be brought to a halt, and that in particular there's no reason to tie it to any particular reason. There's obviously an irrational act. What happens, it seems to me, is when a mob of people get angry about something, as you said, it could be about the accusation that this poor woman was allegedly cutting off the hair of people and so on, or the story that in some cases people were being attacked merely because of suspicion. For example, an African woman was stripped and beaten, I'm sorry to say in the south, in Bangalore, because some other African person, unrelated to her, had apparently been caught stealing something. And so there's this rage against anyone who looked African. And this kind of thing simply should not be allowed to happen. And there's an element of hate crime and there's an element of murder very often. But even if it stops short of murder, even if it ends up being just a case of bad assault, it still requires serious action.
Absolutely. And we also had a petition led by Swara Bhaskar, which has gotten overwhelming support from the public, over 40,000 signatures, and good people like yourself supporting us. We have presented the draft law to the Honorable Prime Minister, and since the Prime Minister has spoken 3 times on this incident, though after he's spoken every time incidents have only gone up, but since he's spoken about it, we hope that the Prime Minister brings in the law this time in Parliament in this session. A, as a parliamentarian, do you see the Prime Minister or his government bringing it in? B, if that does not happen, Doc, how do we come to you as a parliamentarian to help us bring in a law or the Manav Suraksha Kanoon?
Well, let me stress that obviously it would be far better if the government brought it, because the government has the ability and the votes to pass a law. If the government does not do so, which seems at the moment the way they're leaning, then I think that we in the opposition, an individual member like myself, could bring it in as a private member's bill in the next session. The problem with private members' bills are that it's not easy to get one passed. You have to first of all go through the process of a lottery, and once the lottery has been won, which we hope it will be, there is the challenge thereafter of discussing it, getting a majority through, and then passing it in both houses. As you know, the ruling party has an overwhelming majority in my house, the Lok Sabha, which means that if they have decided they don't want this passed, let's put it very bluntly, it won't be. Is it worth trying? I say yes, because there is an aspect of producing a draft piece of legislation that raises the public consciousness. And so if we do introduce it privately, and it's accompanied by a serious effort in social media and mainstream media, to the extent that mainstream media is willing to give it some sort of attention, then it seems to me we might be able to advance the cause of protecting human beings.
What has surprised me, Dr. Tharoor, is the minute we put the petition out, we got over 40-50,000 signatories, people who are supporting the Manav Suraksha Kanoon, and this is without advertising, this is without mainstream media supporting us. So I think that somewhere down the line, as you always say, most Indians do support a law against, or at least against vigilantism. So Dr. Tharoor, do you agree with this point of view?
Yeah, I agree. I think most Indians are decent people who really want a decent country around them, and they don't want a country where people are lynched for whatever reason. They don't want a country where mob vigilantism is allowed to prevail. They want a country that's calm and peaceful and where the rule of law prevails. So let's try and push a law that promotes the rule of law in our country.
We youngsters are having an event where we're going to be having a whole day campaigning called Azadi from Mob Lynching. And if you could like to give us any message or any message to our supporters, please.
Well, good luck with what you're doing. We need Azadi from Mob Lynching.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor. It has been such a pleasure, not just having your support, but continuously coming up to you, seeking your guidance, and we look forward to your continued support and coming up to you every time. Thank you, Dr. Tharoor, for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to do that. And good luck with your very important campaign.